Hello. There was the cause of an argument that was generating a whole bunch of other arguments between Native Americans before America's founders were even born that had been sustained. And slavery had been entrenched in northern colonies and southern colonies, sickly distinctly, and through a number of different, layers of different names of individuals and groups and interests discernible. But that came with that which was undiscernible to names A through Z from since semi-ancient times. And the breaching method knew that nature would demonstrate. There was a hyper-archetypal human fact-cubing nature breaching method involved with the increasing actual worst causes of negative value nature progressions, acts, and natures. Acts like predicate acts, and natures like criminal insidiousness natures. For example, Fox Connecticut News and WFSB and WTNH have sources also involved with intelligence families next to them through time, through decades, and in the World Trade Center attack as collusions with them. WFSB attached me to fake conversations with them and with others about the World Trade Center attack. And people in fake conversations with them, in fake places with them too, and fake ties to strangers. When I caught them at the same time forcing a child abuser, leader of kids. A principal upskirt nature was involved with more natures of digital crimes, with women judges and prosecutors and natures of investigators, and investigations also having been collusions. They had time rules with untimely deaths and murders that were brought up at the same time. Even if any or all that stuff was made up, because the news uses right to lie. And there is increasingly ties between people that I don't know at all. They'll tell you this, except for where and how they're pretending other, because they're being influenced to do it as collusions with people that have been putting fake things in databases at each campus I went to. Increasingly educators and people associated with the Ray Reynolds. And next to a kindergarten class I had, there are houses next to there, involved with them putting fake things in databases. In other words, trying to make fake exception of knowing me just by being in my and located next to them, as people increasingly involved with police and courts with wire crime acts and methods, and refusing to identify themselves legitimately, switching names, switching sequences, while sticking fake things in databases. They're increasingly involved personally too with foreign and domestic medical families, putting fake transcripts in through the mail. They've been presenting the presidents of the United States with fake World Trade Center attack information and conversations about it with WFSB too. No, these are people with next to WFSB, next to Fox Connecticut News, next to WTNH, which is also the FBI, has rules of whole wire crime acts and methods of Wethersfield police. They attached me to fake going to the police station and having a police report when I was a kid, because the kids they did have make police reports. One of them gave or at least one of them gave an affidavit about how they forced him to make up things. He didn't even know me. And they made that right with the big exception. We don't even respond to their conversation. So they have roles with the kids, actually with overt criminal enterprises and private ones. And with predicate acts between campuses, kids that don't even go to the same schools. They make fake exceptions because of how nature uses exceptions in exception nature as itself, as that identity of volume. That is not any other identity of volume, but it is them anyway. We are not the other species bodies, but they too have two eyes. Quality aspects, nature, consciousness, the same as us. So we are anyway because that further hyper simultaneous identity that connects to all things. See, we have been systems simultaneous as humanity's value and volume science, which comes with how we are individuals of an individual human species body. All group differences are in demonstration of them being generated by the relativity of the identity of the hyper simultaneous, which I'm naming it that. It's a distinct identity of simultaneous nature, because We are individuals, group difference slash S, and then there's a species body, just like the other species bodies. But they didn't invent why and how all the species bodies share quality aspects in nature. And we didn't invent it. We are being shown, that's one of the many ways we are shown the simultaneous slash the identity of the simultaneous slash hyper simultaneous. But appreciation of a breaching method for a scientific value, for example, as what caused slavery, as what caused those negative value nature progressions, acts, and natures. It means by that which was entrenched right through America's founding, right through other countries' foundings. They don't know how to speak about that properly without blaming other things, others, ourselves. We're how properly speaking about that, properly using science demonstrates there's a breaching method. And nature shows us even, I'm not a lawyer, nature shows us even countries A through Z, we are even obligated to charge a hyper-archetypal criminal enterprise syntactically, even if it's no longer standing, even if it never did. But this is definitely more probable and practical to theorize, let alone to convict. For example, we have known criminally foreign influenced databases, identities of relativity. I learned at Central Connecticut State University there was laws against if someone was found out to have been in the presence of someone speaking about building infrastructure outside of internationally monitored conversations. That person, even because you heard someone speaking and didn't say something, you and everyone around you would be hurt, killed. See, we still have this fake suit and tie integrity, counters to it and exceptions as collusion slash S. In other words, and there's a nastiness between the Democrats and the Republicans, and they're blaming each other for it exactly the way the breaching method wanted and needs. And or they're blaming us. We don't know them. There is Boolean logic being forced. They don't even understand. Every leader, no matter how powerful they get, if you come from entertaining, they replaced James Madison's words. And the difference between campuses A through Z with this, is also used to be as value that can be used to measure and maintain. Fact, treatment nature, syntax nature, quality aspects, and nature styles of logic and reason of nature as criminal insidiousness, self-value, or that body is sensed, including if that body is a majority of people, including if it is everyone, Black pupils. How long have we wanted discerned by people that have a breaching method clearer than day? Anyone who's honest could discern a human fact treatment nature breaching method. And two, it's discernible that the difference between it as a predicate acts with facts delivery system method or as a criminal insidiousness nature delivery system method, whether it be positive syntactic treatments or negative. They were our collusions to keep the identity of the breaching method and of names involvements as they actually are with behavior descriptions, instances descriptions, overt criminal enterprises, private ones. The branches of government, the differences of the intelligence, families, foreign to domestic. They make confessions and demonstrations now of their relativity. So a certain type of victim slash hyper victim is only allowed to be heard, even though the Constitution dictates other. But see, because people won't follow mandated law, because everyone blames on other things, others ourselves, and then defended that as styles of collusion. The Connecticut corrections offices and the judicial branch offices have roles of all kinds of natures of identity theft, fraud, slanders, planting fake instances, and instances all except and fake changing the value of exceptions. which is in relative ways, because this before Obama was even in office, before the World Trade Center attack, I used the phrase American exceptionalism. Before Americans and Russians and everyone starts using this phrase, American exceptionalism. People involved with the World Trade Center attack, former standing chairperson on the Railroad Racketeering Influence and Corrupt Organization Act, the differences of his involvement or the other countries, agency or in courts and legal voices and or nature's involvement. That is also used by those involved with the the criminal insidiousness nature of hyper sophistication that was a collusion with all sides of the building physically and with the sides as people with Saudi Arabia tied to Claudia Scalura. She has roles with a Joe DeMoro and a Ray Reynolds on off with names on off and next to each of the campuses I went. A Ray Reynolds, the only class I had with him was in kindergarten. He has roles with a whole bunch of people with the name Harris, too. There's a Harris family involved with judges and prosecutors and a whole bunch of different foreign countries at Quinnipiac University with predicate acts, identity theft, fraud, slanders, fake ties, and fake natures of ties to me with the Kevin Harris, as his roles with proven child defenders, leaders of the kids, and more involved. Also, where how they have good people be and stay evil, because their involvements are right where they are victims / hyper victims. And in other words, but they want to have a debate about that. They don't even have, no, they touch me because they need to have a fake conversation with me, pretended. Where and how the police forms, they had fake conversations with me as a kid and then as an adult. Weathersfield police can't be trusted. And with other police forms, Whiting Forensics and state police families interstates involved with a Ray Cololo and a Joe DeMoro and this Ray Reynolds and an Eric Jensen. And he has family members involved with all along the Burlington Turnpike and next to Hartford Hospital with mayor's family members and their neighbors. Increasingly, people tied to a former Mayor Gold, involved with the parks, planting evidences at and next to them. See their roles, they want to put security cameras, which is good. But in other ways, it's bad because the worst roles with the overt criminal enterprises and private ones, they have timed collusions with the interbranch on all sides of criminal and civil cases, even when they're not in those cases. Per their roles of predicate acts with facts, sticking fake things in databases, changing and faking what's digitally recorded. Because they were recorded means, as the breaching method showed them, they spoke and used their differences, including male or female leaders of the branches of government. They're going to speak for law regarding the impositions on those subjects as systems abridged from that one which is hypernated pure. Species body of individual bodies, all group differences generated by the hyper difference. In other words, otherwise, the special difference as Earth's and our own is forced from here, Leaf of Hadith. This is more probably and demonstrably more practical as regarding what pantheism was about, which is an essential function for the republic for which we stand, America and other ancient republics, and this valued exceptions in exception nature, to stay led by that which is hyper invisible but still discernible, and also further not as criminal insidiousness nature, which it also longs us to contemplate, where it longs us to be led by the source of its revelations, to be guided by how it gives us revelations. We have the same color eyes and different color eyes at the same time, for example. It has relativity to the system /S that have left this out, how nature itself was and is projecting to us but we have what is only natural as criminal insidiousness, speaking as if it could speak for nature anyway. See, because it is it is a bridge from the science. It is America was forced to begin abridged and pretending other. Otherwise, that body would be sensed, including if it is a majority of people, including if it is everyone. Because before America was founded, before even Russia was founded, and I don't even know what year it was in, but it was a long time before us. But they still have suburbs that look like American suburbs. And they were forced by laws. If anyone was found out, even to be hear people speaking about building other, that person and everyone around them was tortured, killed. Worse, made example of. In other words, and you think they're going to be honest about what happened any side? What were witch trials about? Even if they're made up, the witch trials were about that breaching method in trench, measuring what everyone said as collusions with itself, as against everyone else, including when helping them. The difference between that, this breaching any identity of relativity, like a criminal enterprise being demonstrated by nature or terrorists. See, there are a whole bunch of different tactically juxtaposed natures and methods of predicate acts, organized crimes, and methods of them with the people. I'm not even a lawyer. Hyper-evidentially recorded all sides of criminal and civil cases, lawyers, the court's names, their family members, and the news at the same time, their family members, their neighbors. They're planting the same sequence shifts, self-valued, identity theft, fraud, slanders, criminal insidious natures of bullying and logic, and fake motivations. Increasingly, because the breaching method knew that one of the things nature was going to demonstrate to us, that a whole bunch of different causes and negative value nature progressions, acts, and nature subjects that we all don't want at the same time. In other words, I lost my chain, but conscious. But in other words, it's being caused by this breaching method. They're sharing criminal insidiousness, natures of bullying logic. A, therefore B. That can't defend that and afford exceptions in exception nature to be addressed as it actually is. The Constitution unabridged is just like a program. And the forming of the black pupils, because we're going to have a hypertheater that appreciates this projection, this hyper projection, this projection / hyper projection, because any subject we could grapple with, individually grouped or together, it can only be used to discern a portion of the identity of all space / existence, which we can't discern its complete identity. That everywhere we have the value of a portion of what is true always, discernible, like the value of the seasons here now, for example. It comes also with its complete identity of relationship to itself and the value of that as three equally and increasingly increasing values and of relativity to itself. And again, Earth's not just our own, a special difference. And this where the shared bodies of consciousness could be, were, and are demonstrated to. For example, with temperature, our needs not to go too hot or too cold. Nature is demonstrating us to its answers that the ancients already had revealed. And then they were replaced, not just to replace them, but to measure and maintain self-valued roles with those who replaced it through them, for them, only allowed, only capable of being, and or that body or a group of sense, including everyone. So, like, for example, the debate regarding change or making America first, nature shows us it wants us to make sure and check that every country is making their own people make their country first, or they're sensing their own. A whole bunch of ways the Constitution's abridged, and other was and is pretended. And there are recorded means to discern that. So we are supposed to say that it's not, America's criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions raw, being and having been used remotely, criminally foreign influence. Instead, they're going to blame it on. They have the sources of Judge Napolitano, for example, calling America names, but then they want to call America's names when they do that because they want to force things between courts that have been used remotely, criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions raw since founding. They hadn't. For example, no matter who, regardless if the whole thing was made up, you don't leave out which trials were about, which is that breaching method. That's replacing where and how we actually reason and think. And with the state's formal delusions, too. A whole bunch of people at Harvard Hospital have roles of people from Wethersfield who have roles with names next to campuses who have been planting evidences and fake conversations with quotations into databases at Harvard Hospital. Foreign and domestic military, they're overt criminal enterprises and private ones. They're not legitimately unmarked police forms roles with the acting professors involved. And with the corners of streets, with the news planting evidences at corners of streets that's manifest, where and how this branching method showed the identities of difference, like the three branches of government, the intelligence, overt criminal enterprises, private ones, names A through Z. The news at the same time. They have to self-value their differences used to keep the real reason people are addressed with positive or negative criminal insidiousness natures of questions or statements to them. Because also confessions come in the form of statements. Also where this is manifest against everyone sickly distinctly, but also sickly non-distinctly, including countries A through Z. It is manifest as an identity theft, fraud, slander method. And so in other words, anyone who wants to deny that just because we have black pupils, whites of eyes, and we can discern in the fact sheet nature, quality aspects of nature of the people who speak for the law, the people who speak for American history, the people who speak for the sciences. They are criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions raw. They are using their knowledge of good and evil and why and how they're the only ones that know certain things exactly the way the breaching method knew they would. They're changing and faking. Their self-valued roles changing and faking, hiding from what people say online, lying about their motivations with it. There are mass digital crime acts and methods between police forms used remotely, between the different types of judges used remotely. Especially, it is concentrated some ways at the superior courts, some ways at the probate courts, which have roles right inside elderly homes, right inside veteran buildings. It appears to be only because of their roles with, in other words, wealth and the natures of wealth with all the drugs and the pharmaceuticals and their laws and things like that, police forms with that, resolutions with that, and them using such as resolutions when there are way better solutions originally still. And where that appears to be debatable, they're pretending it's debatable when people use short words properly. and the quality of action between each other shows such is not debatable. So Weathersfield town offices have roles through administrations with federal agencies and with state police families that are also with other interstates involved with people involved with predicate acts on my street, with the same house/S involved with wire crimes and whiting forensics with a Bob Chase and probate court judges that forced the principal child defender not caught by fabricating police reports roles and putting their delusions at the same time also evidences, refusing to identify themselves legitimately roles, time collusions with overt criminal enterprises and names next to and at body dumping spots brought up. Intercities, a whole bunch of bad things were recorded, brought up, and this was verified on Facebook. That's why that's part of the reason they were motivated to be courts and Weathersfield Police with their Facebook pages. And Hartford Hospital also has digital sexual offenders for the rules and medical offenders with probate court judges. There's a Judge Killian and their family members. There's the ones with the name Delaferro. I don't know if he's the one relative to them. There's ones I don't even know their name. They're brothers. They weren't even in my grade, and they were involved with like a Brian Silver and a Brian Silver and a Leahy family with foreign and domestic medical families putting fake information, fake quotations and conversations with people through the mail, fake uses of drugs. They have roles with people at the community center of Weathersfield, with people that know my name, I don't know their name, and their roles with the Parks and Recreation people through time, involved with a whole bunch of distinct natures of organized crime, and their roles with names near me, with all sides of criminal and civil cases, interstates too, in the Ninth Circuit Court next to the World Trade Center attack tower. Their roles with the people with the name Scalora that also forced Saudis to collusion with them, and Weathersfield Police that are forging, switching names, stacking predicate acts with facts at my house and all sides of it, with the fire departments too. It has something to do with their roles with Russians, with corners of streets near the campuses, and people that have been planting evidences with them. I never saw a Subby Bajero on a campus in my life. He has roles with intelligence family, recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed, kids from my town and from my area of town. I don't know where in other words, he has roles through time with people from the Britain, Central Connecticut State University, and next to it with intelligence families and judges, judges and prosecutors and their family members with a whole bunch of different countries that have been collusions with acting tied to as collusions, sticking predicate acts with facts and databases, and with all sides of criminal and civil cases involved with that, and the news at the same time, putting the same sequence shifts as collusions, for example, and refusing to identify themselves. I have asked Judge Napolitano many times to get the Connecticut Interbranch onto paper, one name and sequence. So increasingly, one of the things that connects them is their uses of roads and routes. And it's not legitimately their roles with any nature of things. In other words, people have reasons to lie and to hide things tied to their, in other words, they demonstrated they have roles with this identity racket at the youngest ages, when that's one of the answers that nature itself is showing us. Those laws, there's an identity racket going on, worse than war crimes, black pupils. See, we agree about things that people pretend we don't agree about, and they make fake exceptions. People want the subject treatments not to leave those exception nature out, including leaders. They don't know how to defend themselves. And so, in other words, they have styles of fighting each other, the Republicans and Democrats, and roles with who speak of exceptions, systems, tactical terror, you know, from how nature itself is the exception nature, and shows us the relativity of how programming works, for example. Identity has relativity to positive and negative simultaneously. Identity has relativity the same way values and value progressions have relativity the positive and negative simultaneously. Finite, grouped, active, and grouped as the active, and progressive as the active has yet to be here, as valuable, but it's already here. Because the identity of the hyper simultaneous is only increasingly valued, only positive unto itself more and more as identity is, that is unabridged. But we have not gotten our Constitution this way. And here many pray. So because the difference in where we can discern roles with the breaching method is also collusions. Again, with all sides of criminal and civil cases in interbranch switching names and sequences, and with the news at the same time with terrorists, the attackers. The same names have roles with Cuba, with people with the name Scalora. And they said he had a girlfriend named Mackenzie. I don't know anything about her. In other words, I never had a class with her. It has something to do. She has names of people on off the Wethersfield Pizza and next to the state judicial branch offices and the corrections offices. They're increasingly roles with names planting fake phone and digital evidences with foreign and domestic family members. Of Wethersfield Pizza is next to the Wethersfield, the Connecticut judicial branch offices. They have roles of wire crimes and digital crimes with a principal sex offender and people with the Board of Education, also with religious spots and the interbranch uses of their differences. There are male and there are black and white female judges involved with some KKK themed, black themed, Confederate flag themed intelligence on off the judicial branch offices and off the corrections offices, planting evidences and predicate acts roles at and next to campuses and with the news at the same time. And they tell people they use the right to lie where they don't have the right to lie, changing and faking the value of what people say was and is. So in other words, the black pupils is a way to describe how our founders were. They would have been perceived as, terrorists. So they had to hide their roles. Every single nature of founder, and there are three natures of our founders, Americans, Native Americans, the founders behind James Madison and his plan. And you can count George Washington as that. But we were supposed to be honest about his extortion. And then the third nature of our founders are those founders who had to be forced to be our founders, which is everyone. The only reason they had the means for unity was because James Madison's plan that George Washington and the founders behind him that George Washington agreed to help. They counter-extorted at 13 locations and forced people to break the syntactic laws. And they were so crazy against every single person. It had been sustained that way. That in other words, to measure and maintain everyone collusion against each other, otherwise that person's sentenced, everyone next to them. So they had no means to defend themselves from that measure of checking everyone, but to rely on our founders from then on. But our founders and the means of it checking were already entrenched too deep. That's one of the things too, that witch trials are about, even if they were made up. It's about that breaching method that was entrenched too deep and was having used too long. The same syntactical impositions it imposed on people in differences A through Z, individually grouped and together, and it made them self-evaluate syntactically, while and in defenses of that, blaming other things, others, ourselves for it, even when true. That's why it was sustaining that to make and keep knaves, Knave, and sickly distinctly. and a nature of damage control as collusion that can't defend itself and afford to be, let alone to protract. Short words by the Constitution unabridged, and valuing how the communications of our founders were greater than and more finite than what they said inside those contexts, forced to entertain quality aspects in nature as criminal insidiousness, tactically delusions wrought, speaking for things like justice, speaking for things like freedom. Anyway, many pray. So, in other words, one of the really important things about freedom, about forgiveness, is because where and how there are a number of means to demonstrate that there was a human fact-sheeping nature breaching method was and is manifest. Where and how it's manifest, like for example, how black people's whites of eyes projected by nature, different color eyes, same time, how that's left out in the same colors as the breaching method employed to play these games with. In other words, our founders, clearer than day, communicated for us, president/chief, and to appreciate how that breaching method was adapting to the language as Native Americans or as our founders. We're Native Americans and our founders, which are distinct from our presidents, except for George Washington, as his roles, having enabled the plan of James Madison. But again, we were supposed to be honest about his extortion. And the plan was to extort the rest of counter-extort the rest of the founders and presidents. Presidents are already extorted by that which had slavery entrenched. Oh, because the majority have to agree is slavery right or not? No. Not only is the debate about that leaving out the exceptions to it, in other words, the breaching method employed it. If someone wants to debate that, even that is evidence of collusion and delusions with the breaching method. You don't leave the breaching method out from any subject at countries A through Z. That's why we have suburbs in America and in Russia and Ukraine that look almost exactly alike. The suburbs unfolded tactically denatured. People need, on a mass scale, needing food, means, and needing to self-value roles with abridged value nature systems. Economies. How long the economies originally instilled, where our founders communicated nature demonstrates the difference between between the guilt of economic identities like industries, names, and things like that about or work criminal enterprises, private ones, or just that insidiousness of A through Z, again, having come through campuses that communicated tactically ulterior from that which nature communicates, and exactly the way the breaching method wants and needs and maintains. See, they have the nature of negotiations and what they call peace, that is criminal insidiousness natures of peace. Their solutions are point nuclear wars at nuclear weapons, while they're the only ones that can transfer us to Earth. In other words, they want to speak of the nature of debate regarding economics because everyone came through schools abridged at countries A through Z too, leaving out the other name. That's why and how. In other words, how are you? So in other words, the black pupils are something inside of Little Rap Guy and Friends cartoons, but in real life, like Judge Napolitano, for example, he has treatments of world issues that are going on. We might have World War III any day. Russians and Americans, people are dying every day in Ukraine. People are dying every day in Palestine. And that has been sustained, torture, extortion, in fact, tribute nature slavery at countries A through Z. The suburbs were designed tactically to nature before America's founders were even born. And the cities were designed like urban slash suburban. And then to unfold straight urban and suburban slash urban, where the suburban side was converted into 2 and 3 family houses. For example, reliant upon value nature systems, tactile from nature, where we hunger because nature answers questions with this and makes us ask questions with this. But again, tactical terror from these systems that we are apart from. So the black pupils, we have black pupils, white survive, same color eyes, different color eyes at the same time with the exceptions part, but the same color eyes are white and black. And the breaching method employed other communicated for nature with it. Now it's only naturalized criminal insidiousness nature, where we have value treatments with this syntactically. Otherwise, that body is sensed, including if it's a majority of people, including if it is everybody, per a method. See, everyone's shock and awe per all that was entertained, that was sustained. And then our founders were born, not just in America. Our countries individually grouped into nature forces our names to be grouped and to be valued that way syntactically. But also a breaching method is forced originally and still it to be tactical from how nature shows us it and to value it syntactically in the species volume. That's why the value of humanity in our speech is relative. Boxing to teach us things. Boxing moves our hearts to teach us, to show us soul slash S. Boxing, martial arts, and wrestling are grouped by the identity the sciences share, by the identity of nature. It shows us this. But they are about fighting by the rules. But the rules have been abridged since semi-ancient times. That's why we're supposed to get the Constitution unabridged. James Madison's communications are changed. James Madison, we're supposed to understand our founders as those behind James Madison and as James Madison and his plan. And then they went and got George Washington to agree to use that plan. And again, that plan was to counter-extort and force the other founders. And there are proofs that they were alliance with some of the Native Americans. Native Americans were fighting with Native Americans against Native Americans, most probably and demonstrably, because the breaching method was forcing that, because it took over value nature and tactically denatured the ground below our feet at countries A through Z to make self-value roles with value nature system tactical. I'm using the word value nature system rather than economic system, because nature's system is economic system, but it is simultaneously greater than, it is more finite than, and it is active relativity to it. Pantheism, the Republic can't make positive value nature progressions, acts in natures properly without pantheism. It functionally. Pantheism is led but not by many gods, but the identity of the hyper-simultaneous. That identity that shares, that the 5 parts of time are shared by. There is the part of time that is before the smallest finite detail or sequence. There is that's the first part. There's a part of the time that is, there's a part of time we know in the past is true always. There's a part of time now we know is true always active. Group truths we know about. And there's an extent of the future, like the value of the seasons. We know about that now. Those 3 parts are grouped. Also, there's the part before that. And there's the part that is the future that we know we don't know about, but we know about that too now. And there are realities that are grouped that we know we don't know about. And these are the parts of the identity of hyper-simultaneous, the identity of that distinct identity of simultaneous nature. Again, too, that is it shows us that we aren't the ones, and other species bodies aren't the ones that invented why and how the different species bodies have two eyes, quality aspects in nature, and when there are exceptions, there are demonstrations of the same thing. Unless someone's, criminal insidiousness. There are truths can be used for lies. Truths can be used to screen lies, to screen motivations, other names, roles. And a breaching method knew that it could show the formal identities of the law, the overt criminal enterprises, the private ones, the intelligence, the different. At the same time, the news, the communications, locations, names, that they need to hide the same sequence shifts. Finite, they have to keep the real causes of negative value, nature, progressions, acts, and nature's self-value, being and having been, blamed on other things, others, ourselves. Just like that's one of the things that we could discern where and how their hyper evidential means recorded for us to discern that others communicated for our founders. Our founders communicated for us, not to accept what they said, leaving out awareness of how the breaching method, like, for example, I learned at Central Connecticut State University in notes that if anyone was found out to have been speaking about or even heard someone speaking about building homes outside of internationally monitored conversations, that person and everyone around them was hurt, tortured, killed, worse, made examples of. This slavery was already entrenched north and south. This breaching method measured and maintained types of experts, for example, blaming the causes of the American Revolution on a tea tax, and then defending that, but leaving out how, in other words, North and South slavery was entrenched. And we don't even have to know about that to discern it. All you have to do is know what we know about the Native Americans, what was sustained against them before America's founders were born. What was see president/chief. Nature itself, too, shows us these, in other words, three identities of our founders. So we have to appreciate how the other founders were forced and presidents are. This breaching method knew that even if it becomes a king or a pharaoh, if you're above locations, areas, and states, locked with a whole bunch of different countries, tactical ulterior from how nature communicates with our value groups. It communicates with positive or negative value nature progressions, acts, and natures. Before America's founders were born, before Russia's founders were born, before Ukraine's founders were born, the suburbs were designed to cause negative value nature progressions, acts, and natures, and to be a theater. Mow the lawns and make money. The only means to cause positive value nature progressions, acts, and natures more and more is if to be self-value roles syntactically with criminal insidiousness natures of positive value nature progressions, and as collusions with the hyperforeign. And we can discern this, but the means we have to do it is means where we can discern all sides of criminal and civil cases. Like with witch trials, no matter if they were made up, there are still collusions with the identities of law, with where and how. That is used to measure and maintain the breaching method left out with the identities of reason, the identity, the names of the people, the sciences. The breaching method, the human fact should be nature breaching method is one of the things that is true always with those laws where substance as. And if we appreciate that properly, we could discern that answer being and having been replaced. Other things, other ourselves, besides the breaching method, is being and having been blamed for things like slavery. Slavery stayed entrenched because of the entrenchment of the roles with countries individually grouped and together. Even though they were fighting with each other, they're still fighting to, to be the foundation as the suits and ties, the counters. I don't know where year the suit and tie came about, but it's the same thing. This came before our founders were born. There are houses that were built before America's founders were even born, and they're still standing. Right through our schools, other things, others ourselves, was and is blamed, are blamed for things our founders communicated for us to blame on the breaching method. So you have entertained roles with witch trials and slavery based on color laws. It's going to cause, even if you don't, it's not your fault. You're forced to have roles with it, whether it hurts you or helps you. You're forced to blame other things other than yourselves for what that causes and where it has relativity to all subjects. See, what demonstrates that also demonstrated to the ancients about the republic for which we stand. And how, in other words, it has to be unabridged because that is hyper pure, hypernated pure, unabridged. See, Native Americans have failed to make proper the words regarding how this breaching method has below their feet criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions raw, descriptions of nature's value under their feet, of nature's system, of their own, as their own. In other words, because they came through campuses that were and are measured and maintained from off them. Self-value roles with them further hyper additionally motivations additional to its own, the breaching method from off it, apparent the only ones, but in other words, not just because that's how they train at campuses, how we're teaching this subject. In other words, they're separating the subjects too to take more time. The ancient nature itself shows us any subject to appreciate it properly. What we are appreciating is how and why. The sciences appear not to share an identity, but they do anyway. It's not just a joke when I say boxing, martial arts, and wrestling share an identity. So, vaccines. There's one guy on here that writes, who has a screen name called Ahmaud Arbery, was a violent kleptomaniac. And he writes predicate offenses. I don't know who this is, but there are proofs that he's involved with a whole bunch of people tied to former director of the FBI, Robert Lusker, former standing chairperson on the Racketeering Influence and Corrupt Organizations Act, and Hartford courts and New Britain Superior Courts, family members, with people intercities involved with the wire crimes, with the ones with the wire crimes of the Wethersfield police through time, and retired police chiefs as ties to the same house, and one's tied to them with this syntactically. And they're pretending they're needed to, and they're leaving out the whole bunch of different board names. Sometimes it's them, the ones that are the criminal foreign influence. Sometimes it's the courts or the police forms involved. There are multiple police, but these are people also timed collusions with Sandy Hook predators. One's associated with, and as the medical people associated with Adam Lanza too. They're putting mass fake transcript, fake quotations into databases. Then they're showing out to presidents. Their Harvard Hospital has a whole bunch of people that have roles in the World Trade Center attack with intelligence, Demorals Market and Rocky Hill now too. Those spin there's places. A whole bunch of people tied to a Joshua Stryker too, and with principals. They have roles with a whole bunch of people tied to a Joe DeMauro, have roles with a whole bunch of police forms with home break-ins in my area through time, and Wethersfield Police Department, and the FBI and state police, and his educators, and ones near me. that I even had conversations with involved with identity theft fraud. They repeat fake things. These are roles of predicate acts with facts methods that maintain criminal insidiousness natures. Or only are going to speak for the law, or they're going to be sentenced, not collusions. And increasingly, to defend that, they have to self-value other having been communicated for our founders, and they communicate for us to appreciate. Just by having president slash chief, too, for example, we're supposed to appreciate that breaching method, that forced equality of fact-shipping nature, entertained, and names use is entertained. Otherwise, that body would be sensed through their own. Note those laws were against who heard someone speaking about building a home. Crazy slavery laws. You couldn't even be allowed to hear people speaking about building a home outside of the ones that rolls with that breaching method entrenched. Had slavery, torture method, extortion method entrenched. Still, people try to debate that. The only reason they get away with debating it is use /s of those same self-valued principles that are pretended principle, right, where, and how, as collusions, blaming other things, others ourselves, where our founders told us to blame the breaching method. That's what they communicated to us to blame. And they communicated for us to understand clearly where and how no one had free speech, and worse, everyone had to show that they were a collusion with the breaching method. Individually grouped and together, they had to show that too. Otherwise, that body was sensed. This breaching method is exploiting how we are being and have been. Systems individually grouped and together, tactical terror from how nature communicates with those differences. While nature shows us its hyper difference. Again, we have the same color eyes, different color eyes at the same time. In other words, so this is better than, this is like we can make pantheism not just as a company, as a religion. This can better than lead how would they put taxes and things like that. You have taxes and natures of debate regarding economics and things like that. They're implying that, in other words, those natures of conversations are self-valued, being used to screen, like, for example, pretending that maybe they're getting money for agencies because they have secret agenda and they need to get money that's off the records. Anyway, Wethersfield town offices has their Facebook pages, and they have the Wethersfield Police Facebook pages, New Britain Superior Court's Facebook page, collusion with West Hartford locations, names, before the World Trade Center attack, and at different campuses, including the family members of a Dean Judd. I never had a conversation with Dean Judd or his family members verbally. These are also people involved with former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, and his lawyer, making nonverbal confirmations and recorded confessions and demonstrations of their roles and the timing of it, with sequence shifts with people and federal crimes with people next to Fox Connecticut News, at Fox Connecticut News, next to WFSB, at WFSB, next to WTNH, at WTNH. They've been planting evidences all along Route 175, all along Route 3, with names associated with them with this. Increasingly, Whiting Forensics has roles with a Phil Cololo, with people with predicate acts on my street, identity theft, fraud, slanders with the intelligence community, foreign and domestic, and more child offenders of kids. In other words, it's important to get, and there's an Anthony Yagaman also recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed. Phil Cololo and his teachers also recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed, involved with some people with religious spots involved, and their roles with the kids with that, but with criminal insidiousness. And, like, for example, how my algebra teacher repeated about sexual relations between a neighbor, a little girl that reportedly, I never met, but she lives near me. And they increasingly have that and people tied to them involved with that, with religious spots and differences and things like that, and planting evidences on all sides of my house, including on Facebook, where this was recorded, confirmed, demonstrated, confirmed. See, but the interbranch are recorded use of all kinds of predicate acts methods, and then they pretend they have criminally foreign influence readings of statutes regarding the validity of what's recorded online. They're leaving out the exceptions, exception nature. That's just a hyper additional. They have rules fabricating mail and whole fake conversations and ties to people of all ages. Then years later, to cover up having done such. As time collusions with overt criminal enterprises and private ones. Increasingly, the same people tied to mayors from Wethersfield, people involved with overt criminal enterprises, identity theft, fraud, slander. A former mayor, Gold, is also increasingly involved with people at Whiting Forensics, with crime scenes, various natures of child offenders, identity theft, fraud, slanders, and people that live near me involved with them with predicate acts through time and on Facebook. Federal evidences, crimes with them, sequence shifts, fake motivations for their language on there. In other words, and relative to leaking, even if part of it was, sometimes the difference between them rolls with it or the other people who influence them that, or the foreign involved. Because there's also a hyper foreign that needs. That's why, how do you think Russians and Americans have nuclear weapons pointed at each other? They have the means to transverse the earth. You have means to, in other words, force equality of fact, human nature unabridged. We have black people's right of eyes. So there's a possession over the people who have any knowledge of over good and evil. In other words, they want to have a nature debate with the experts of the sciences that can't afford what's actually discerned relative to the use of all locations /s. They can't afford to have discerned the relativity of this regarding the syntax, describing how computers work, describing the value of that, their means to do such. You will see all sides of all natures of criminal and civil cases. There has been worse than criminal competence with it. Forgiveness is not to blame the difference between the branches of government, the intelligence, or the criminal enterprise overt and private. That difference is used differentially too. Relative, everyone was and is used remotely, showing where and how they need to pretend they could speak for practical reasons. For example, use Immanuel Kant's phrase. Leaving out the breaching method. You don't leave out the breaching method when nature itself too shows us that's one of the things true always. That, in other words, one of the reasons that one of the things true always that caused those crazy laws. It was a human factor nature breaching method. And if we examine the logic or nature of who would deny that, of any voice that denies that, it comes with demonstration /s of the same thing, /s. And this is also relative to where and to how name switching into branches involved. Timed uses of their differences as female judges, as black and white female judges, as time collusion with sexual and medical offenders of kids, with the news too, at the same time, with KKK black themed, at the same time, intercities. Increasingly, a whole bunch of people out of Harvard Hospital and New Britain hospitals have roles of my neighbors, Kalal and O'Brien, and people associated with them named Kerr and DeMora, who have all kinds of federal evidences crimes with Wethersfield police and Peruvian child abusers, leaders of kids involved with identity theft, fraud, slanders with them. They have something to do with their roles with corners of streets in Old Wethersfield and at Southstein Highway and Town Line Drive. Increasingly, even Joseph Lieberman is involved with the FBI and courts, family members planting evidence as predicate acts roles at Central Connecticut State University with names that planted at each campus I went to who are tied and timed use /s of that. So there are judges and prosecutors involved with Kevin Harris, involved with sexual and medical offenders of kids, with leaders of kids at the principal child defenders campus, and their roles with medical offenders of campus kids too, with his family and his roles with the daughter of a principal when I went to that campus. I never met her until after I graduated. And I didn't even meet her then. I just was in her president day trying to make a fake exception and me knowing her. And then because the child roles with the people increasingly with predicate acts with Weathersfield police, all kinds of wire and mail crime acts, and names at Hartford Hospital that run in to be all sides of they make this side of the issue. All sides, they have their patients, their family members, family members of campuses, fire departments. They all run into Hartford Hospital at the same time, even if they're undercover in those positions, not as the doctors pretending to be another. They're putting people in fake conversations with themselves, and they all have collusions, wire crimes in the same house, and people tied to them that brought up the principal child offender, like a Robert Rodriguez, also involved with an untimely death at Trinity College in Hartford, Connecticut, and his roles with people with a Daryl Chandler, all along. There's places in Old Weathersfield on Main Street in Old Weathersfield, conjunctions to it, like Route 175, right from there to Central Connecticut State University, are people involved with the intelligence community leading up to the World Trade Center attack in that context and since. Also, Daryl Chandler has roles with Koreans per him as a stranger. Also, roles with people at Trinity College, with increasingly with confessions tied to Ray Law, recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed. And he's one of the cousins and one of the family members of Phil Kalal. Bob Chase brought up a Phil Kalal with Whiting Forensics, increasingly involved with the principal sex offender. That they have federal crimes and digital crimes with them, with state police, interstates with the same house, and foreign and domestic, intermilitary too. Get them on paper, please. One name and sequence. Black pupils. Here, it is time. Please, Fox News, WFSB, and WTNH, please help me regarding the fake conversations you guys have with me as various natures of organized crime so we can address this. Judge Napolitano, please get them on paper, one name and sequence, Weathersfield, please. I force people to call them. And now then they attach me to fake conversations with them and others. Now, that as confirmations too, it's increasingly 3 times they did that. Hartford Hospital has roles with a Kevin Dillon and a whole bunch of people tied to him with sexual and drugs and medicines crimes with kids, with judges and prosecutors and their family members, and people that lived near me through time, tied to a Kevin Dillon, and people interstates involved with a Violet, the name Violet, involved with their narratives and natures of roles with the overt criminal enterprises, private ones. At the same time, with the interbranch switching and forging names. At the same time, with the name on, off, next to, or driving by corrections offices and the state judicial branch offices. Fear God, because these are the same ones with their family members' time collusions with the names of the World Trade Center attack place and the court next to it. And the court itself was used from inside the court. They changed the sequence, the date of when legal papers were brought to the court and timely stamped. They changed it to make it look like they were handed in late in the World Trade Center attack context, with a court right next to it, as the ones with other spots next to it too, and with the names at the World Trade Center increasingly involved with predicate acts, intercities and interstates, and intercampuses. I never had a class with a Dan Keene in my life. I never saw him around the campus in my life. They put me against. They put on a list to make it look like I had a contest against him to become class president to make a fake exception. They're increasingly making fake exceptions as names increasingly rolls with recorded time connected, totally different criminal and civil cases, including in the World Trade Center, where both names on both sides of that case and their sources were increasingly involved with predicate acts with me. But they were also increasingly attached to fake and changed communications, including by WFSB and their sources, Fox Connecticut News, and their sources next to them too. Fear God. Please, Judge Napolitano, do what's right. Please, Judge Janine, do what's right for Fox News. Please follow mandated law. Tell me who disbelieves, because there are people involved with them with other natures of things and threats, and there's overt criminal enterprises involved. Also, these things were recorded on Facebook too. They're not they're lying about what they think about what people said on Facebook. You'll see that too recorded. The breaching method showed them they need to hide this. These are the same ones involved with the principal child defender and Sandy Hook child defenders, intercities roles. Same ones involved with the World Trade Center, interstates and intercities. Same ones involved with Washington, D.C. Two speech class teachers. Increasingly, I had people involved with wire crimes, falsified police reports, all sides of criminal and civil cases, like a Mike Pandolf and his teacher. In other words, we're going to get them on paper, one name in sequence. Let's go. Let's go. I want a response for the principal child offenders' confessions and those recorded. There's a Michael Emmett, then and further involved with people next to their campuses in town too, involved with identity theft, fraud, slanders on a mass scale through time. Increasingly, Russians, Koreans involved with the same ones, with the Italian, the difference of the things, male, female. Again, we have black, white, female judges involved with the police forging things into databases, intercities, and on my street as the ones. Too, they're switching and forging names. We're going to get them on paper. Judge Napolitano, they have your Facebook page involved with this. They have, in other words, they have criminally influenced readings of statutes originally still religion, big trial drives. Get them on name, one name and sequence. I shouldn't have to beg you. Get them on paper. Let's go. They put me to fake uses of drugs too. They know that is recorded too with people with the Parks and Recs. That they have fake conversations with me. Increasingly, people tied to this Kevin Dillon, planting evidence on all sides of my house since I was a kid. They should fear God. And with the people with the teachers at the school, I never even have conversations with. And they try to make fake exceptions too. You're going to discern this with them. You guys are obligated by the law, black pupils. Period. We're going to force mandated law proper. We're going to wake up these suits and ties and counters. They think they have the integrity to speak for things as serious like wars, capable, wars going on. They can't speak because they can't even get the thing. We're going to show them mandated law. We're going to show them what they think about American history. The descriptions of it are criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions, raw, black pupils. And they want to blame America. But then when it comes time to demonstrate where you're supposed to blame America, because it's not free yet, then they want to pretend you're not. That's why they're calling names. In other words, they want to debate about what they know. You guys have criminally foreign influence uses of location /S. See those we're going to examine the stories in the news. We're going to examine use of location /S, collusion /S as actually recorded. Increasingly, there are journalists tied to and intelligence families, foreign and domestic, tied to a Perone family, too. We're involved with this next to Fox Connecticut News. And Chuck Casper, too. He non-verbally confirmed this 2 times. He's increasingly involved with intelligence near me who have been planting predicate acts with facts, identity theft, frauds, landers with him. He's been attaching me to fake locations, sequence shifts. He has rules with people all along the Berlin Turnpike and Route 3, which this kid Pete that knows my name, I don't even know his name. And he has rules of people with the judicial branch offices involved with all along with the routes, planting evidences. Fear God, hide and plot. And his name was brought up. Someone named that and dropped his name. One of the people involved with my neighbors with some untimely deaths, people, and confessions that brought up the principal child defender's campus. And the confessions, because they're trying to make it look like I knew them. In other words, all exceptions, exception to nature too. They use that criminally for them. They can't get on paper. Get the witness to the police on paper with the courts, Judge Napolitano. Before the World Trade Center attack, in this context and since, they've been planting evidences, intercities together. You should fear God. They've been using all natures of investigations, investigators, people next to them, and criminally foreign same time with the overt criminal enterprises, private ones. I'll show you how to think, people. A through Z. We're going to force mandated law, proper care and love. At A through Z, well, other species are going to be gone. Nature, we're going to let science lead. We're going to need pantheism. We're going to need it led by that identity of hyper-simultaneous. We're going to be needed led by that identity that is the 5 parts of time. /3. and the difference of that too. We're going to examine this. Yeah, vaccines, prepare.